Moving on to the second panel, we have, if they were just talking about how you can impact something from something small, this panel will talk about how do we use our platform, a big platform such as AFL, and she can even use that platform to make change in this world. But not only AFL, there's also comedy and climate change. How does that all tie into making impact? Guys, please welcome the second panel. We've got Yvette as our moderator, we've got Nicola Barr, and we've got Daisy Mann as well. Our next panel is going to take us global, and we're going to explore everything that has to do with leadership and platforms here. Welcome, guys.
Didn't have a chance to come and say hello. Alrighty. Well, my name's Yvette, and before I introduce myself, and these are two amazing women next to me, I just want to acknowledge the country that we live and work on, pay my respects to elders past and present of the Kulin Nations, a country that we're very privileged to also play on and create on in the case of these women. I'm the head of partnerships and marketing at the Western Bulldogs Community Foundation. So we're the not-for-profit arm of, yes, that AFL football club. We're a registered charity and an accredited social enterprise as well. And we program for adults and young people from the inner west of Melbourne out to Melton on the outskirts of Greater Melbourne, up to Ballarat, and this year we're even programming out as far west as Horsham in Western Victoria. So we keep joking at the moment that we'll have to open an office in Adelaide shortly because we're going to hit the South Australian border. I'm very privileged to work out at Whitten Oval on Wurundjeri, Woiwurrung and Bunurong country. And for those who haven't been inside a football club, yes, it's exactly like Ted Lasso. The football department is on the ground floor. We're upstairs in admin. There's a long window and we look on folk exercising very hard while we drink coffee and eat things that don't involve, that aren't very good for us sometimes. So that's a little bit about me and the work of the Bulldogs Community Foundation. But I'm really privileged and excited to be talking to these two amazing women here this morning. Nicola Barr is an AFLW player, amazing, sporting an injury this morning, which is not good. I wasn't expecting to see you on crutches. Nicola plays for St Kilda, and she has a very strong, passionate interest in climate change. So we'll be talking to her about the intersection of sport and climate change. And then closer to me is the amazing Daisy Mann, who I've seen speak before. She's currently acting CEO of Multicultural Arts Victoria, but started an amazing program, Brown Women Comedy, which if you've not had any interaction with, you should definitely look up online. And uses comedy and humour to create change. So we'll be talking about the intersection of arts and culture and change making as well. So I wanted to ask each of you, maybe Nicola, I'll start with you as our sportswoman on the panel. So I'm often struck working at an AFL club, the number of times I see online people saying sports and politics don't mix, which always strikes me as interesting. But I wanted to ask you, was there a particular point in time or an event when you realised that in fact you could take your passion for sport and somehow mix it with this, well, somewhat lofty, sometimes it feels impossible, desire to change the world? And obviously you've been working very heavily in the climate change space. Yeah, was there a moment where you went, hang on a second, I can mix these two things?
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I started playing football in the AFLW for the Giants in Western Sydney. So obviously Western Sydney is one of the hottest places in Australia, and we trained out in Homebush and had some very, very hot days, particularly at the start of my AFLW career when we were playing over summer. Thank God we're not doing that anymore. But I'd always, I'd grown up being always really passionate about the environment and being outside. My family always used to do hikes together or cycle trips together, and nature and the climate was always something that was really close to my heart and really important to me. I finished school and for some reason studied medical science. I'm doing absolutely nothing to do with that now, but, wasn't overly passionate about it, kind of did it because I thought it sounded maybe good and it was a good thing to do. Finished that degree and was playing AFLW, and I had a bit of a break kind of wondering what I wanted to do, and always had this underlying passion for climate action, but as an athlete wasn't really sure how those two things mixed. But then in 2019, 2020, obviously the Black Summer bushfires came through, which was devastating for lots and lots of people across Australia, obviously. But my own personal experience with the Black Summer bushfires was running out to training in what felt like apocalyptic conditions. There was an orange-red sky and you could smell the smoke, and I was kind of like running out for footy training like we always do, thinking like this feels really weird and uncomfortable. Like, I'm not sure I should be doing this. And my teammates and I were having discussions about how if we were struggling in these conditions, I remember getting told we had to go and do these conditioning laps, and like you were just breathing in the smoke. It didn't feel very healthy. And we just started sort of saying, if we're suffering from this as professional athletes with all of the resources to adapt and look after ourselves, what does this mean for younger kids playing footy or playing sport? And obviously to a lot of us playing professional sport, sport was a huge part of our lives growing up. So the conversation really quickly turned to how are these younger kids managing to train in what felt like, really apocalyptic conditions. And it wasn't long after that an email landed in my inbox from two AFL players, Tom Campbell and Jasper Pittard, who founded Footy for Climate. And as soon as that email landed in my inbox, I was like, right, this is how I'm going to join the two. So I'm really grateful that they had the passion to start Footy for Climate, and I just sort of said to them, how do I get involved? I really want to do something and learn about how sport and climate mix. And since then, I've joined Frontrunners, which is an organisation that was started by Emma and David Pocock. David played for the Wallabies and was the captain of the Wallabies. He's now obviously the senator in the ACT, but was kind of the only athlete during his career that was speaking up about lots of different social, cultural, environmental issues. And when he retired, they had lots of people come to him and Emma and be like, what can I do as an athlete who cares about climate change? And so Frontrunners was born. And Frontrunners did a lot of work starting to help begin Footy for Climate. So that's kind of how I landed at Frontrunners, still very much involved with Footy for Climate, and just working on that intersection of sport and climate.
Amazing. Daisy, how about you? When did you realise, I can blend comedy with creating change? How did that happen?
So interesting. Before I started Brown Women Comedy, I'd actually never been to a comedy show. So I think I'd been to maybe one at best. I mean, for some context, Melbourne International Comedy Festival is one of the largest in the world. It's actually the third largest after Edinburgh Fringe and Montreal, just for laughs. Edinburgh Fringe is Fringe, so if you take that out of the picture, because they have so much more, Melbourne's probably the second. 770,000 people go to that festival, and there's 650 shows. We did some research to realise out of 650 shows, about 213 are solo shows by women, of which only about 17 were women of colour, 17 to 18, of which 2 were South Asian, so Indian, Pakistani, Sri Lankan. And that got me really thinking about sort of diversity and representation. If we have one of the world's largest comedy festivals. And I always thought, I grew up quite like being a funny person. I always thought humour was a really good way to diffuse tension and to bridge gaps. And I got thinking more and more about the power of like comedy and humor to look at how we shape culture. So for me, shaping culture is one of the most profound things that we can do with our power and privilege that we all have to some degree, especially if you're in this room. And I found that I went through, there was a phase, I don't want to say phase, it was a period where a lot of people called me an activist, and I was an activist, and I still feel like 10% of that, but I became more into, I guess, social impact, social entrepreneurship, and comedy for me was a way of, I guess, giving a platform to women of colour who would write a set very much based on their lived experience. So whether it was about being queer, whether it was about a woman who was, I think she was Pakistani, married to an Indian and then divorced in her late 40s, whether it was someone talking about their mental health, talking about things that the community is just not used to hearing. And so that's sort of where I've started to realise how much the show not only made people laugh, but made them really think about things that they all felt deep down or knew of, but just were not spoken about. And for me, one of the most interesting things prior to the comedy, I was doing a little bit in the domestic violence space, particularly with women of colour, South Asian women, migrant women. And one of the things that keep coming up again and again is shame. And how, I guess, a root cause of a lot of things, a lot of a sort of DV, not a cause, but a reason why people don't seek help is shame. It's why they don't tell anyone. It's why they don't speak up. And when you sort of think about what is it that leads to shame, particularly in, like being Indian in South Asian culture, we don't talk about sexuality. I mean, I'm Punjabi. There's not even a language for you. There's not even a word or vocabulary for private parts. You know, it's just never spoken about. And I'm like, if we don't speak about it, how are we going to speak up when something happens? And so for me, I guess, comedy was that bridge in terms of when women got that up there and spoke about, I mean, they were sexually liberated or they were, exploring their queer identity and things that they would otherwise be made to feel ashamed of, particularly in our communities. It was really, really empowering and gave people permission to feel seen, heard, and to feel a sense of belonging here. So I think that's sort of I don't know if I answered the question of where it started, where the seed was planted, but I sort of just learned over time. It was just a little idea to run an event. The first event we ran we had a 100-seater room. We thought like maybe 30, 40 people would come. 80 people showed up, so we did 2 shows. The second year we scaled up to 6 shows, 100 people each. Last year I went bonkers and we did 40 shows with 4,000 people. So across Melbourne, Sydney, comedy festivals, Adelaide Fringe, and we took it to Scotland, Edinburgh as well. And wherever we went, we sort of put local women of colour on the lineup and said, do what you want. Get up there, you got 10 minutes, go for gold. What do you want to tell people?
Amazing. Get onto the socials and check it out if you haven't. Nicola, back to you, just on this question of climate change and environmental justice. Are you able to tell the group of an example or perhaps 2 where you've seen the impact of sport in changing hearts and minds? Before we were just talking about systems change, which is obviously very, very big and scary. But just in your experience in the organisations you've worked with, where you've just seen that little spark and realised you've resonated with someone.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, I really want to come watch the show. It sounds awesome. I think that, you were talking just before about how many people attended those kind of festivals and the impact that comedy or culture can have on a really huge group of people in Australia. Sport is exactly the same. I'm not actually sure. You might know how many AFL fans there are in Australia. I think it's like 3 million, maybe. Lots.
Heaps.
There's a lot.
In Melbourne, it's kind of obligatory, right?
It is, yeah. Being from Sydney, this is a bit of a shock to me. In Melbourne, everyone's obsessed with it. I haven't heard anything but trade period in the last 2 weeks. But yeah, we've got a huge number of fans of sport here in Australia. So if you think about the reach that sport has on, any kind of issue, it's massive. We're currently in the middle of Pride Round for AFLW, which is huge. The visibility that creates for young people in the community or people who might be afraid to be exactly who they are. They see these athletes who are role models to them in society, look up to them and go, oh, that person who I really looked up to is themselves and, is out and proud and I can do the same. So I think sport has a really powerful opportunity to create positive change. I've just spoken about Pride then, but it's not just Pride. Obviously, the work we do at Frontrunners is really focused on climate change. And one of the first campaigns that Frontrunners ran was called The Cool Down. So Emma and David Pocock started Frontrunners and sort of decided that the government wasn't doing enough the federal government wasn't doing enough on climate action, and they wanted the government to be more ambitious. And we know that politicians absolutely love sport. You said sport and politics don't mix. I think we've seen Albo at a fair few Hawks games. It's absolutely intertwined. And so Frontrunners ran this campaign called The Cool Down, which was an open letter at the time to the federal government calling for more ambitious climate action. I think they had a target of signing up sort of 10 to 20 athletes, and they ended up having over 460 professional athletes in Australia add their name to this letter calling for more ambitious climate action. That was sort of about 5 years ago now, I want to say. And, you know, I'm obviously, it's very hard to measure cultural change, obviously, but I think we have seen a real shift. There's a lot more athletes now speaking up about climate action and why it's important to them. And I think that there's still a long way to go, but we have seen a pretty significant shift in the way that our government, I guess, treats climate change. We'd still like it to be much better. But, yeah, big shift there. So that's, I guess, one example here in Australia of some of the work that Frontrunners has done. But even the other day I was reading this article about a player, I can't remember what his name or which team it is. I think it's like Real Betis. Is that a football team? Anyway, it's in Europe. And he came out talking about the fact that he cycled, took his bicycle to training. And the reason he does that is because he just thinks, well, I live close to training and I don't need to create any more emissions. And obviously that's one individual. I know the previous panel was talking about systems change, and that's really important. But the power of, a really important footballer in Europe saying, I ride my bicycle to training because it helps reduce emissions. That footballer, I think, has something like 3 million followers on Instagram. Like, the influence that kind of small thing that he does has is huge. We've seen Pat Cummins here in Australia be really vocal about the fact that he cares about climate action. Frontrunners has done a lot of work supporting him and his organisation, Cricket for Climate. They've just received $50 million to fund 500 sports clubs to install renewable energy and batteries and solar to help reduce emissions. So I think when we've seen these really high-profile sports people talk about the things that they're doing in their lives to help reduce emissions and to have a positive impact on climate change, it's infectious.
Yeah, 100%. We're very lucky at the Community Foundation to be able to access, the brand of the Bulldogs, because, it is hugely influential. And though the work that we do as a foundation is very different to what the club is up to, just on a week-by-week, day-by-day basis, we're able to draw people into the work because of that passion for and trust of the club and trust of the brand, which is interesting. Daisy, I wanted to ask you about the role of multicultural communities in Australia, and even you can go global too, but just wanting to ask you what role you believe they play and can play in driving inclusive responses to national and global problems. The previous panel were talking quite a bit about having the right voices around the table.
I think before I answer that, can I do a quick 1 minute fun activity?
Yeah,
you probably know what it is because you were there when I did it at Melbourne Women's Foundation. But just a quick thing. I want anyone to yell out a number. One person. Yourself, yeah? Any number. 10. What was your name? Gahana. Okay, 10. And someone, yourself, any number?
18.
18, over here. 2. Maybe someone here. 7. And what did you say? 33. Okay. That's really interesting because what I love, someone did this activity with us once and I never forgot it. What's interesting is because, Gahana, you started with 10, right? And then everybody else said a number that wasn't too far from 10. Nobody said 1,000,000. Nobody said 1,000,000,000. Nobody said 100 million or anything, or 20,000 or anything really. No one said anything above 100, I don't think. So what they did this experiment with like thousands and thousands of people in rooms again and again, and they found out whatever number the first person says, no number anyone else says is going to be too far from that number. I think they looked at the average. And what that said a lot was about the power of influence and how we are subtly influenced by people around us. So, I mean, coming back to what you were saying in terms of power, whether you're a footballer with 3 million followers or you're just here as part of this room, you all have some sort of power and influence. The things you say, the things you do, the things you purchase, the way you live your life does influence people around you, even though it might not be as obvious straight up. But I just love that activity because we all think... I mean, this is a whole interesting concept around free will. We all think that we have a choice in everything we say, but we are, no matter what, influenced by marketing, by people, by communities. So it's always good to be aware of what is it that you deeply believe and what actions you want to take, and just that self-awareness of, oh, actually, I'm doing this because of X, Y, Z, not because it's what I want to do. And coming back to your question, was it the power of multicultural communities in shaping sort of...
In driving inclusive responses.
Okay. I think it's nothing...
Getting their voice heard.
Yeah, well, I genuinely believe nothing without us for us, if that makes sense. So if solutions are being built to engage with multicultural communities, culturally diverse communities, I think they need to be involved in that response design, and often not simply in an advisory capacity, but leading the way. I think we're in a country where we've had migrants for a very long time, but it always astounds me in terms of the lack of representation. The higher you go in organisations, even looking at educational institutions, once you start to look at exec, board level, you see a glaring lack of like cultural diversity in those spaces. So I think those solutions and that true engagement's got to be designed from people within the communities. It's the exact approach we take when we work with like First Nations communities. They need to be consulted. They need to be leading the change. It's sort of that one level past advisory. And I think that's the same with culturally diverse communities. And I think, I forgot the exact stats. I should know them. But I think 25-30% of Australians or more have a parent born overseas. That's we're getting close to like over a quarter of the population. So I think they need to be involved in those decisions to design them. Like good questions need to be asked rather than someone coming in and saying, hey, here's what I think we should do. Really talking to different stakeholders. Also understanding that, I mean, culture, it's not like sometimes there's this perception that culturally diverse communities all want one thing. Like there's this harmonious way to get somewhere. But it's a very it's a very big community, and different communities within that have different needs and requirements. And it's almost like, for the sake of simplicity, we often forget that it's a very diverse community within itself, and different people from different cultural backgrounds have different ways of looking at things. And how do you find a middle ground with the change you're trying to enact? Like I know when the referendum happened, I don't think culturally diverse communities were engaged well at all. Like it just, a lot of them weren't.
Talking about The Voice, Stacey?
Yeah. Was it the referendum? Sorry, the one that didn't succeed. Wasn't that we put... Yeah. So I remember when I made a video in my mother tongue, like in Punjabi on TikTok, that reached 300,000 people that watched it from Australia. But a lot of the comments were very negative, thousands. And I just thought, I haven't seen these people on Instagram. I haven't seen them on Facebook, but they're here on TikTok. And most of them lived here. So it just showed me the huge gap between the campaign's ability to educate and work with and bring that community on the journey. They had it, and no wonder it was not going to get up, because I think prior to that I was living in a bubble of everyone who probably agreed with me.
Yep.
And I still do. Like I guess all of our closest friends and allies probably agree with what your outlook and beliefs are. But tapping into what the majority of people think involves going outside. Yeah.
Yeah, that's that's fascinating. 300,000 TikTok views. Wow. It's a lot of comments to respond to. Nicola, if there's one thing I've realised after nearly 12 months hanging around at a AFL club, and not having been a massive fan of, even though I am a Melburnian, massive fan of AFL prior to this, is the resilience of the players to just get up again, come back in, another week of hard training. Maybe there's a loss at the end of that week. I wanted to talk to you just about this question of resilience, because I think to be a professional sports person, it just absolutely has to somehow become part of your being. But then when we're looking at a really difficult issue like climate and sustainability and the state of the planet, how is being a sports person and that development of resilience, and look at you today on crutches, how's that impacting and influencing your work in the climate space where, some mornings it must be hard to just get up and keep trying to push against a system that's not helping us most of the time?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I'd say to that is being an athlete's not that hard. Like, everyone's like, oh, it's so hard. It's like, well, we get paid to run around, so it's pretty fun.
I disagree.
I think we're really lucky as athletes. Like, I've got the best job in the world. I get to go and hang out with, 30 best mates 4 days a week, 5 days a week, and get to go play footy on the weekend. And to be honest, working in something like climate, gives me some really good perspective. I'm currently playing on a stress fracture, which is why I have these crutches. And, absolutely some days I get up and I'm like, oh, my God, this is the worst. But to be honest, we're talking about global issues that are absolutely massive. I haven't got it that bad, I think being an athlete gives you, at times you are in a bit of a bubble and you kind of think it's the most important thing in the world. But for me, working with front runners and getting to meet people like you both here today, and people that really care about some huge issues that we're facing, gives you some really good perspective. I also think it's amazing motivation to play better football or be better at your sport. You can do more when you've got eyes on you, and it's a really privileged position to be in, so I'm really grateful. And I think I should have said before, we were talking about Pat Cummins or, a footballer with 3 million followers. There are some amazing athletes that don't have that kind of social media reach or might not be as well known, but who are having amazing conversations with senior executives, either at their football club, within their sport, or with senior executives of some major companies who might sponsor their sport, to have difficult conversations or challenging conversations behind closed doors, like the inside track work that some lower profile athletes are doing, is really amazing. So I think we shouldn't underestimate the impact of athletes, no matter what their influence or platform is. There's lots of athletes who are doing really important work behind closed doors who might not get that same recognition.
I think if I just add to that, you raise a really good point in terms of emailing executives and things like that. But I think when you're young, one of the things that you can do and get away with, that slowly start to get away with it less and less as you're older, is you can email anyone in a position of power and just say, hey, I'd love to grab coffee. I'm interested in learning about this and that. And, when I was... I still do it. There was one year where I sent 100 messages like that, and I heard back from 20 people. But, I heard back from our vice chancellor. I heard back from one of the directors of, I think it was car sales. I heard back from so many people that I didn't expect to hear back. Interestingly, I didn't hear back from the influencers, but I heard back from really interesting people. But when you're young, you can actually just go. You'd be surprised how many people don't do this. Particularly with just approaching it from curiosity, not I need or I want this or something. Just approach that relationship like you're making friends with someone. Often it's very daunting. I remember the first time I messaged someone, I was, is this awkward? Is this weird? Is this unusual? What are they going to think of me? And I was just really curious because they were quite inspiring to me. And I was like, well, how am I going to learn to do what they've done without a conversation with them? And I'm just going to navigate it by myself and work it out. I think you can expedite that by shooting out emails, talking to people, kind of overcoming that original discomfort, just knowing you're not there to ask or to get something. You're just curious and you're learning. And being young, you can really get away with that for a while. I think the older you are, the more I have to say, oh, I'm this person. That's why I want to talk to you. But people love meeting young people and having a chat with them because they're actually not used to getting that many emails, believe it or not.
Not interesting ones.
No.
There's a lot of boring emails.
When I went to London, this was a few years ago, I had been telling myself I want to start a podcast, and I just hadn't done it for a few years because, the whole producing side of it was a bit difficult for me. And I messaged this woman on LinkedIn. She was a CEO of a really large publishing company called Bonnier Books. They were really large, and they do, I think, £80 million turnover. And she was the only woman of colour I could see in the entire UK when I was searching who was CEO of a publishing company. And publishers are the gatekeepers sometimes to some level of culture. Like what ends up on your bookshelves comes through publishers, often isn't self-published. And I messaged her and I said, oh, I have a podcast. Can I interview you in a week's time or something? I'll be in London. And she replied saying, sure, what's your podcast about? I didn't have a podcast. So I had to, in a week, make up what my podcast was going to be about, make it look a little bit legit. But the reason she responded to me is I was already quite active on LinkedIn. Like I've been pretty active on LinkedIn for a decade. And that entire decade, I've not been looking for a job at all. But I sort of treat it like I know it's like you roll your eyes, professional social media, but it's very different to a resting CV now. It is like the more you can learn as you're going and doing things and just learn transparently, get comfortable with sharing your journey, the more opportunities that just sort of come your way. Like I've never been looking for a job on LinkedIn, but I've gotten gigs and speaking gigs and consulting gigs. And ultimately I started working at Uni Mel, managing their entrepreneurship department. And that was Entrepreneurship Accelerator Program, MAP. And that was because I posted on LinkedIn that I just left my job and I was looking forward to a 2-year sabbatical, which I was going to take, but then I started working there. But again, that was from LinkedIn. So you sort of never know what comes your way when you share your journey.
Yeah, good advice. Put yourself out there and shoot off LinkedIn messages or emails to people. As one of the token older people in the room, I can say I love getting contacted by younger people who are curious.
Do you get contacted very often by like younger people, older people? Like, do you get a lot of DMs?
Well, I've worked in fundraising and philanthropy for most of my career. So
yes.
I do. But not necessarily from a place of curiosity, more from a place of I want. So it's a peculiar career I've landed in an effort to try and change the world. Daisy, I was just wanting you to just close the loop on this question of resilience, because creatives also have to get up in the morning, and maybe last night's comedy show didn't go quite how they thought it might, and certainly you work at Multicultural, Vic, you'd deal with creatives as well. It's a bit of a terrorising roller coaster ride for a lot of them. I have a couple of friends who are stand-up comedians and did a lot of work with the Comedy Festival in a previous life, and was in the green room at Melbourne Comedy Festival for the gala nights. And interesting watching which comedians of who are, many of whom are household names, are absolutely panic-struck 5 minutes before they're due to go on. Others, cool as cucumbers. It's really interesting. But yeah, how the arts and culture helps develop resilience, and particularly as you've got a change goal in your mind longer term.
Yeah, it's hard there's two things. Like I feel like I'm 80% a producer, 20% an artist in terms of comedy. But with my multicultural, so I've stepped in as acting CEO of Multicultural Arts Victoria for the last few months. And it's introduced me to a lot of the struggles that artists face, particularly culturally diverse artists. Arts is a very gatekeepy kind of industry. Like the people who get to decide whether your art goes in an exhibition or you get stage time and stuff, all of that it has been very gatekept, I think, in ways that are insidiously discriminatory, I think, even though it's sometimes talking about being inclusive and all of that. It's sort of like, who do you know? Can you recommend someone? Well, you're not going to know the brilliant artist with a refugee background because they don't have the networks. So it's almost on you to go and look out and find people, because they're not going to know to just come to you. And this sort of social validation we look for before we give an artist opportunity, often the people who need it the most don't have that social validation yet because they don't have the networks. So I think it can be really hard to get opportunities. I think, again, it's a love-hate thing, but social media has meant you can at stages just make your own way, and then the gatekeepers can't deny your brilliance. But it does mean making content, sharing, and a lot of artists sometimes don't want to do that, and fair enough, because it's a whole nother job. It's like, do your art and then tell people you did your art. Like, it's another whole job. But I think as an artist, you have to be resilient. because otherwise the industry would just sort of crush you. It's a very hard career to make financially sustainable, but there's no reason you can't do it alongside something else until you reach that stage of sustainability. And always understand that some artists that did make it, they, in terms of financially, managed to make a living out of their art. That often is a small minority, and it's not to dim anyone's dreams, but I'm always a believer of keep doing it alongside something else. I do comedy as well, like the stand up. I do sets myself. I write them, but I am not looking to make a career out of it. But the show, I've become as a collective, is looking pretty good in terms of how we generate revenue, how we platform, how we scale as a collective versus one person alone. So, and that's helped us sustain our helped us do other projects within our non-profit. So I think it's getting creative, getting innovative. Resilience, you're going to need it if you're in the arts, because it's tough. It's not like you're going to get a job somewhere. Well, a lot of artists have a job somewhere and then they're doing their own arts practice on the side as well, which I always think is good until you've found a way to do it full time, if that's your goal.
Good advice for, I think, people wanting to create change, that a lot of social media platforms now, do give you an opportunity to put your ideas and your thoughts out there. Find that one other person or that other group that feels the same way you do. Find your tribe, find your people. And also the issue of the side hustle. I mean, Maddie this morning actually talked about the fact that she was doing a marketing job until only a few years ago when she took on the CEO of Little Dreamers full time. So how you can blend that passion project with your day job, at least till you're up on your feet
I think
and
everyone
up and
should have
running.
a side hustle at least once, even if it fails. I've failed at 7 side hustles.
Yeah.
But I think everyone should try one, because when I've also interviewed over 50, maybe 70 people and employed maybe 15, 20 over the last 5-7 years, and I'm always interested in people's side hustles, because when they're like, oh, I don't have experience yet because I'm just out of uni, but hey, while I was at uni I ran this club and this society and I increased membership by 300%, went from 20 to 100. But I'm always looking for tangible ways that people can show their skills in their side hustle or something else they've done, because I think that's what makes you might not have a job, experience in a particular job that's related to where you want to go. Until I got my first professional job, all the jobs I had prior to that was being a waitress, bartender, that kind of stuff. And then I ended up managing the university's accelerator program. And the only reason I got there is because I started and ran the university's social enterprise club. And I got it to be, the student engagement was higher in our club than it was in the university's department. So they're like, why don't you come help us? So I think there's always opportunities like that.
Yeah, so change is a side hustle, right? I wanted to open the floor to questions for these two amazing women. Instructions again are to press the button on your microphone and a green light will pop up. Questions for Nicola or Daisy? Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming today to the panel. My name is Zafira. I'm an international student from Indonesia, and I'm also actually an artist. I actually draw everyone here in the panel.
Oh, wow. Oh, my
Yeah.
gosh, that's
and then
amazing.
also the previous panel as well.
Oh, my
Get an award. Can we get you an award?
Sure.
Shani, those have to go up on the
Yeah.
socials.
And
Amazing.
Thank you. And my question is actually, as an artist, how do we face art or creative block? Thank you.
It's a big question.
Not one for me.
How do you face sports block?
I just-
you get up
just keep
anywhere and go. That's a tricky one. Look,
Yeah, what have you seen the artists that you work with
Does the artist I work with
implement to sort of get over that creative block, Daisy?
I mean, for me specifically,
witnessed?
it's like signing up to something where I have to do something. I might not have my comedy set ready, but I've signed up to do the festival, and there's 100 people coming to the show. So now I have to write material. You'd be amazed at I think it's called Parkinson's law or something. It's I know the same name as the illness, but if you put it on Wikipedia, research that or Google, you'll find I find it really interesting. It says time a task expands to fit the time allocated to it. So, and then for me, the additional pressure of, I actually have to present this work, 100 people are coming. That really, that podcast, I had to make it. I was saying, I can't do it for 2 years. Who would I interview? How would I do it? I don't know. Too hard, And with art, especially when it's especially if it's not your job, someone's not paying you to make it, you're really your own boss. And when you're your own boss, the biggest thing is frameworks of accountability. because no one else is going to say, oh, where's the painting you said you make? Where's the illustration? But sign yourself up, put your work forward for exhibitions and things like that. And if you get selected, now you have to make 10 pieces. So sometimes it's like just knowing what works for you. And for me, it's deadlines. For other artists as well, it's accountability groups. Like find a group where you meet every week, and you're an illustrator. That's what I could tell. Yeah. So find a group of other illustrators and see if they meet up every month, and then just meet them to do that. So accountability that way.
I think I would do so few things in life if they didn't have a deadline. Deadlines are fantastic.
Impose a deadline when someone doesn't give it to you.
Put the deadline on your change-making project, and get a couple of your tribe to hold you to account. There was a question right down the back. Yeah.
Hi, so my name's Muniba, and I'm doing my master's in marketing here. I'm from Pakistan and Dubai. First of all, thank you for the amazing panel. Like, this has been amazing, this topic. I was really interested in this topic, so it's been really insightful. My question is, so I'm working as a part-time disability support worker at Monash, and as you mentioned, Daisy, that this topic for disability support and mental health is still very taboo for a lot of multicultural students. And I want to know how I can make this conversation more comfortable at a university level at least, because I've seen that the support is really, like, a lot of multicultural students are shying away from getting the support that is available. So what would you suggest for that?
That's an interesting one. I would actually research and see what's out there, whether it's overseas and other places, because sometimes there's other ideas that can spark something for you as well. And talking to people about what it is, like getting to the root of the thing. Why is it that they don't want to seek support? The communities that you want to seek support. What is their barriers? And what are the situations in which they would seek support? So it's almost doing this thing. It's actually called, like, in the business world, because I used to run entrepreneurship programs, it's sort of called customer development. And there's some really good interview models that you can do on YouTube where you ask people all these questions to get to the core reason. Like, is the core reason the shame? Is it financial? Is it, I'll share one example of a campaign that blew my mind. I didn't start it, but I helped them come to Australia. I don't know if this is in Pakistan, but in India for sure, there's a culture where if a baby boy is born, that family distributes sweets to celebrate. Is that a thing as well? Yeah, and they call it laddus. So they're little sweet treats. And I grew up hearing that from my mum, that so-and-so had a boy, apanu laddu milne hain, we're going to get laddus. And I never really questioned that. And then it wasn't until I saw this Pink Laddu campaign from the UK, and it was all about giving laddus when girls are born. And that went viral and did really well because it was a tiny tradition, but everyone knew about it. Everyone knew that laddus only go out when boys are born. And there's families here that have been here for 30 years are still doing this. And it's like, gender inequity starts from then. Do you know what I mean? It probably even before, when there's a male child preference. But it started with a campaign online to celebrate girls with pink laddus. So I just like that example because it's such a small thing. They didn't say we're going for a big gender equity goal, we're getting people to, they just went for we encourage you to distribute pink laddus and then send us your stories. So it might even be that you're helping create a platform for people who are ready to share their stories, who are open, because again, like we talked about, if we share our stories, we might actually inspire someone. Like when I've shared my stories online, I've gotten like hundreds of DMs about them saying, I hadn't actually seen someone from an Indian background talk about this, especially a female, appreciate it. So maybe it's you're sharing stories, you're creating platforms to share stories. There's so many different ways. So you've got to decide the mix between, is it ikagi, the Japanese concept of like what you like doing, what you're skilled at, what makes you money. And you might decide your job already makes you money. So this is a side project that you're doing that fulfills other areas. Not everything needs to be fulfilled by one project. The last thing I'd say is just start. Set a deadline, start next month, do something. Because we can spend a lot of time in our heads thinking about, I want to do something, I really want to do it. Someday, one day, I've got an assignment to you, get on with that. But when you start, it'll create deadlines for you and obligations for you. Yeah.
I think this will be our last question. Will it, Ashani? Yeah. What's your question?
Hi, everyone. My name is Mohammed Yassin. I lead a social enterprise interested in supporting refugees start their own businesses. Thanks for the panelists and for your facilitation. I've worked with a lot of, in the young circle and in newly arrived migrant refugee spaces. And I think the topic really is of interest because art and sport is universal languages that we could use to actually communicate many issues, especially with newly arrived migrant refugees and international students into this country. So how do we support the uptake and the participation in arts and cultural and sport initiatives for those cohorts of people, especially refugees, newly arrived migrants, as well as international students?
Yeah, what a great question. Well, I would say at the Bulldogs Community Foundation, we run a program specifically for that exact purpose, in fact. So we work with English language schools through the west of Melbourne, and adults and young people take part in a program of ours, and they play sport across the 4 terms of the year, a different sport in each term. They're all introduced to AFL, of course, as part of that, but we also play volleyball and cricket and basketball and lots of other things that people may have played in their home country. And that's with a view to building connection with one another, practice their English, and also find out about the local sporting clubs in their community that they've settled in, which is a great way to make connection. And as we've said, sport's obviously a great connector in Australia, so it's a great way of feeling at home. We're very lucky that the MCC Foundation support us to do this work as well. So a couple of times a year we take the students out to the MCG for a tour, a kind of a behind-the-scenes tour, and the MCG is impressive at the best of times, but empty on a Tuesday morning. It's kind of wild, and so that's what we're doing. But programs like that, obviously, we're nowhere near touching the full need and demand out there. We're just chipping away at a little corner, I think. But yeah, Nicola, do you have any thoughts on that question of sport and newly arrived migrants, international students even? We had a massive turnout at the Pride match on Friday night at Whitten Oval, reached out to Victoria University and particularly to the international student groups there to say come along and maybe experience AFL for the first time. But yeah, any thoughts for you on footy?
Yeah, I mean, this is definitely not my area of expertise, but I guess I can speak from my experience, particularly with the Giants in Western Sydney, which is obviously a hugely multicultural and very diverse area. And some of the things that I think the Giants did to encourage, people from lots of different backgrounds to get involved in AFL, but sport more broadly was, we did something like, I keep saying I was there for 9 seasons, so I'm still adjusting. But the Giants hosted an iftar event every year annually, and it's huge. And they open the club up, they get lots of people involved, and it's just a big celebration. And, I also have had a teammate, Haneen Zrika, who's Muslim herself, and she was really important in, I guess, I don't want to put too much pressure on her, but her just playing AFLW as well is huge. People who might not think that this is something they can do or get involved in might see Haneen running around and go, wow, I think role models in sport are so important. But from a club perspective, and obviously the Western Bulldogs do a lot of work in this space, I'm still understanding St Kilda's programs a little bit more, but I certainly know with the Giants, they hosted things like iftar and really opened up the club as a space for people to come and feel welcome. And I think, opening the doors to a football club, which is traditionally, not multicultural or diverse, is really important to make people feel welcome and for them to understand that this is something they can get involved in and be a part of.
I think we're well over time, so can I chime in for a minute? Do I have a minute? I think, to be honest, I think sports does this better than arts in Australia, as far as I can tell. I know there's AFL multicultural and there's all these sort of different, I know Western Bulldogs has programs. I think in the arts, MAV, Multicultural Arts Victoria, is in a sort of unique position, and we've been around for 60 years with that hat on, and that's what MAV's been looking at. From an institutional perspective, I think one thing that institutions need to do better is collect better data. I think we've made some progress in the First Nation space on that. We've made some progress almost with gender equity, and what we haven't really looked at is culturally diverse. I think for example, I think cultural institutions who receive government funding and grants should need to report back on the actual diversity of who received any subsidised things, because I think that's how we're going to get equity, is looking at, oh, wow, look, 99% of the artists we put into this gallery that was subsidised are not culturally diverse, you know? So I think it's getting that data so we can more equitably distribute any funds or support that we're doing. I think that's from an institutional perspective. On the other side of like, how do we, as individuals and going to the community, part of it's telling the stories. Like, we ran this thing called Stellar South Asian Women Awards for 4 years. We've taken a break, and we gave awards to women who were doing really interesting things. And a lot of them were like, oh, I didn't really know that I would get this award, and someone nominated them. But then other people in the community saw them and thought, oh, that's actually something worth celebrating. So again, the people we put on pedestals, the things we celebrate, again, a part of the culture we have. Like, I know growing up, sport was not important to my family. They were like, you better get an A. If you're not first, you're last, but not in sport. They didn't care. It was like, you got to get A's at everything. Don't come home with a B. And I was like, yikes. So I didn't pay much. Like, I played netball socially, but from the ages of like 8 to 12. And then my parents were like, oh, well, it's high school now, so you better get serious. You can't throw a ball around.
The end of your netball career.
That was the end. And so, but again, so there's that, like, if I knew another person who was like a brown woman with very conservative, strict parents had told her to be a dentist, then maybe I'd be like, oh, well, she's going to netball with me, we're going together. So I think it's like having someone from within that community go and share their story with others. I think that's huge, because you're not always going to relate to someone who's not from the same cultural background. There are universal things we relate over, but if you've got so many restrictions at home on engagement, like art and sport were not prioritised by my family at all. They're like, well, how are you going to pay a mortgage with that? That's what they said.
Thank you both so much for your insights this morning. It's been really fascinating and a real pleasure to meet you both. Thanks everyone for your great questions.
All right, that was awesome, wasn't it? First of all, Nicole, I'm very glad that you're in St Kilda now. I'm a St Kilda fan. If you don't know her, she's a star, absolute star on the field. But if anything, I think we can all learn from Yvette, Nicola, and also Daisy, that it takes consistency to make change. These people, they don't just do it off of just one day, pops up and that's it, but they do it brick by brick every single day.